Who am I and where do I come from? The quest to understand our roots is fueling multi-million-dollar businesses. I know who I am. Femi, okay?
And I'm Malika Bilal. Today on the stream, the DNA Ancestry craze. Do you know where your roots lie?
Mapping family ancestry often relies on family law, but when few relatives or traces of history are available, what do?
And consumer genetics companies are trying to fill in the gaps. Popularized by US and British television shows featuring celebrities who discover their hidden past, low-cost DNA test kits are offering to help the masses define or redefine their identity. Here are just a few of the countless social media videos of people discovering their ancestry results from online tests.
So let's get into it! Here is the map of the overview of where everything that's in me is from in this world. Let's get more specific. So let's start with Africa. I'm 20% African. She's not black at all. She's lying. This whole YouTube channel is a lie. Why would you lie about being black? I'm sorry, what?
And when I found out that my results are in, my heart started beating. I was nervous to find out what I actually am. But wait, just so you guys know, I'm Puerto Rican. Let's break it down. I am surprisingly 17% African. You know, I knew I had some African in me, but I didn't know I was that much black.
I'm 13% Native American? Yeah, that's not unexpected. Your family's Mexican. Does that mean I can apply for free college?
So if you didn't hear last night, I'm 85% African and 13% European, just British, by the way, which is still so weird to me. So my first reaction is I am so African, and I love that.
I'm 100% African, I think. I haven't been tested. I don't know. It's human nature to wonder where we come from, but what do these results actually mean? To help us talk about this, Julie Granker is a population geneticist with Ancestry DNA. In Boise, Idaho, Kevin Jones-Giddens is a business consultant who found biological relatives through Ancestry DNA. And Joseph Graves is a biology professor and associate dean for research at North Carolina A&T State University. Hello, everybody. Kevin, let's go back to when you were a little kid on my laptop here. How old are you in this very, very charming red polo neck?
Well, thank you. I am 5 years old.
Oh, now what did you know about your family at 5?
I didn't know much at all. I knew I was a foster child. I was reared in New Jersey, and that's really all I knew. No one gave me any other information.
Yeah.
I just was in a foster home, and I didn't look like anyone else in the foster home.
Yeah. So at what point did you decide I need to find out about my family, and the way I'm going to do it is using a DNA ancestry test kit?
Well, all my life I wanted to find out who I really was, a sense of belonging. And it wasn't until this past Christmas that a friend gave me a gift, which is a DNA kit. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought, oh, yeah, DNA kit, whatever. But then something compelled me to say, try it out. And I tried it, and bam, family.
Whoa, okay. Let me just bring in Joseph here. Bam, family. And you say what?
Well, I mean, it's easy to use ancestry testing, or at least it's easier and more reliable to use ancestry testing to determine relatedness with close relatives, because close relatives, depending upon how close, are going to share anywhere from a half to a quarter of their DNA in common. And if you see folks in the database that are sharing a lot of markers, it's a very good chance that those people are closely related.
So was that just lucky then that Kevin found some family that happened to be in the database? More luck than anything
if your
else.
family is not in the database, then you wouldn't find them.
Which is interesting because a lot of the people that are talking to us aren't doing these tests necessarily to find family. They're doing it to find other answers to questions like this. This is one we got on Twitter. She says they give you a sense of belonging. They answer the who am I as an individual. Another person weighs in on that, and this person actually has a stake in it. This is a video comment we got from Gina Page of AfricanAncestry.com. They're another one of these companies. Have a listen to what she told us.
AfricanAncestry.com uses genetic ancestry testing to help people of African descent answer the question, who am I? We do this by placing single branches of the family tree in specific African countries and ethnic groups. The effect of this work is transformative. AfricanAncestry.com empowers Black people around the world with a sense of place, pride, and belonging in Africa that genealogy can't offer.
So Julie, a little bit of an ad right there, but I think her last line about giving people a sense of place for so many people who don't know where they originally came from must be a story that you've heard from people who do Ancestry.
It is, and I think all of those YouTube videos we were looking at were really a testament to that people take an Ancestry DNA test to learn a little bit on where they're from. Maybe they want to learn about some new relatives. Maybe they want to try to confirm some family lore in their family tree about that Native American princess. Or maybe they want to see if there's something else that hasn't really been passed down that they don't know about. And I think,
why do you think people are so shocked? I mean, people in those videos were like, I'm African! Or I couldn't believe I was Native American Indian. What is the shock factor there?
I think it's maybe part of, wow, my genetics actually, I believe this to be the case, the woman who thought she had some African ancestry, but it's 85%, it's some number, it's something to really assign to, something scientific to assign to their personal identity that they've held for so long. I think that's a really exciting aspect for people.
I just had a look through to see what was out there. Have a look here on my laptop. There are so many options, so many kits, so many ways of you to maybe find and track down where in the world your ancestors came from. Kevin, why do you think all of these tests are out there? Why do you think it's such a popular trend?
Well, in business, success occurs when expectations are met, and people are wanting to find that. And so I think there are a lot of industries and people who are capitalizing on that, helping people to find that, but it's a demand, supply and demand.
Let me just ask you, Julie, to explain how, hold on a minute, Professor John. I want to actually understand what it is if you get an Ancestry DNA kit. Yeah. What's been sent to you?
What's sent to you is just this box, and inside the box, there's this DNA testing kit. So it's a tube where you spit into the tube, fill it up to the line, and then you mail it back to us. Once you mail it back to us, we send it to our lab. Our lab will analyze, so your DNA contains, a lot of cells from your mouth, and inside of those cells in your mouth is DNA. And so in the lab, we take that DNA out of your saliva, and then we look at these, it's called genotyping, but basically what that means is we're looking at all of these different places in your genome, basically reading it like we'd read a book, getting particular letters out, getting the readout from that, and then running it through our algorithms to deliver the results that you saw people reveal on YouTube.
Sure. Joe, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I'm quite skeptical about whether DNA testing really has the resolution that many of the DNA companies claim and that the public seems to believe with regard to particularly placing African ancestry. There are a number of population genetic assumptions in the algorithms that are being used and the genetic markers that are being used to try to determine exactly where someone comes from. And quite frankly, when you look at the nature of the sampling that's been done to determine the marker panels, and you look at the population genetic assumptions, they're just simply false. So we don't really know exactly where individuals come from. We probably can get it down to regions of the world, but to the degree of which we're talking about specific ethnic groups, that's just really not appropriate conclusion drawn from the science.
I can address that a little bit if you'd like. So behind a lot of all the algorithms we do at Ancestry DNA, for example, behind both the relative estimation as well as the estimation of where people might be from, those people saying they're 20% West African or whatever that may be, And that is a lot of people like me and population geneticists behind the scenes looking at the genetic data and really trying to validate whether, okay, if we tell someone that they're from the Ivory Coast in Ghana, does that actually translate to what they actually said based on their genealogies and pedigrees? So at Ancestry, for example, we have lots of family trees that individuals have filled out, and from those family trees, we can use that to help understand and validate our algorithms. And so we provide that, those estimates to people. I think it's important to keep in mind that all of this is an estimate that's constantly evolving as we do more work behind the scenes.
Yeah, but there's a fundamental problem in the way the estimates are done. And that problem is the fact that what you're using are modern day population data to infer populations that existed in the past. And if we find a genetic marker in a modern day population, we don't know if that marker has been in that population for the entire time and what its frequencies were in the past in that specific population, nor can we say with the absence of a marker in another place that it wasn't there at some point in the past, but it's simply gone. And this is particularly problematic for regions of the world that went through tremendous population turmoil, like Western Africa did as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. So there are regions of the world where I might have more confidence that modern populations represent past populations, but that's certainly not going to be the case in Western Africa. So it's simply a flawed assumption.
So I hear the back and forth there, and I think that answers this tweet question we got in from Bedin, who says, how accurate are they? I think you can hear the distinction of opinions there. But Kevin, in your case, I want to know what you think of the answer to that question, how accurate are they? I pulled up your ethnicity estimate that you provided to us, so I'm not just pulling it up out of the blue. You were able to trace your family back to 1798, is that correct?
That is correct. And I understand what Joseph is saying, but there's something flawed in Joseph's logic. He admitted that it can show you a region of the world where you might be from. And it definitely showed me the region that I'm from, and was verified through public records. I looked back at slave records. I looked back at where my slave family was from. It also was congruent with what my family oral stories were told. As far as my mother saying, my family, we have an Italian, her grandfather was Italian, that came through on the Ancestry. So there may be some flaws, but it's accurate enough for me to say my family comes from this geographical place of Africa, and it is backed up through records that we've searched through the slave records, through the records of my family. So I feel very confident and very happy with that result.
And you know, I don't dispute that in your case, that your oral tradition and documents might have validated the DNA testing. But
no,
the fact of the matter...
It wasn't might, they did.
Okay, let's say they did. But the simple fact of the matter is it's not going to do that for the vast majority of people for which the testing is being done. So you can't use one anecdotal data point to make a claim about the validity of a method. All you can say is that there are some people who have documents and records that suggest that their DNA testing and their documentary oral history is correct. You're not going to find that for the vast majority of people of African descent. In your case, you just happen to be lucky.
So Joseph, there's someone here who might agree with you. This is Mark, a former member of the Stream team. He did the test himself, and he had some questions and a little bit of skepticism. This is what Mark told us.
When I did my genetic analysis from Ancestry.com, I was surprised to find that a quarter of my ancestry comes from the Caucasus region, which Ancestry.com defines as anywhere from Azerbaijan down to Iraq, or from Turkey to Iran. And while it was cool to learn something new about my family history, it left me a little bit unimpressed by how vast that range is. I really can't point to any one country or region as something that's a part of my family history, but I don't know if the science is there or will ever be there to be so specific.
So I know Julie wants to respond, but Joe, did you want to go first?
Let her respond, and then I'll respond to her.
Okay, so I think that caller, that video really highlighted an important point, really tying into what Professor Graves was talking about, and is that, you know, when we try to give someone an estimate in a particular part of the room, or a particular part of the world, in this case, the Caucasus region, the reason why this individual might not have that ancestry in that region broken down into other places is really for that reason of accuracy. That, you know, we're limited in part by the fact that humans migrated around the world, they moved around their DNA, passed it down to their kids, passed it across country borders. And so the fact that we can't, distinguish certain granularity in that region really just comes down to the fact that there's mixing in that region, and that really translates to our test. And so, for those, when we come up with those regions around the world, they're regions that we vetted based on accuracy. So it's a trade-off between how much can we break things down versus making sure that the results we deliver to someone are actually confident.
And Julie, just so people can sort of picture it, because if you've never done a test or had your test results come back, the one that I saw of a friend was a map of the world with big circles around regions of the world where it was believed that her ancestors came from. So there were big chunks. There's a big chunk of West Africa, big chunk of Central Africa, a big chunk of South Africa or Southern Africa. And it said your ancestors came from these places, and then it was a percentage breakdown of where in the world it was believed her ancestors came from. So that's sort of the results that you get back. But Kevin, what you did was you took some results and then you backed it up with research. I want to show you what happened when Richard Branson took part in a TV program in the US, which is very, very popular, which takes celebrities and takes them back to find their roots. So we had the DNA science plus the research. Have a listen to this.
The baptismal record of Richard's second great-grandmother, Eliza Reddy, doesn't list the name of her mother. This seemed odd. How could a mother of a newborn be anonymous?
I wonder why, Richard, do you think that the English would not list the name of the mother?
Well, it was just prior to Victorian times. I'm assuming that they were feeling slightly uncomfortable. Did somebody misbehave, do you think, around about this time?
That's a good guess, but let's see if that's true.
The answer was buried in Richard's DNA.
Now, Richard, this is a result of your admixture. Could you read those numbers, please?
95.9% European and 3.9% South Asian. Well, it looks like, whether the family knew it or not, I may have some Indian blood in me.
Joe, I'm guessing this was not one of your most favourite programmes on TV. If we could
you're actually wrong about that.
Okay, tell us why.
I was one of the people who was in the conversation that led to African American lives and finding our roots.
Right.
In fact, I actually work very closely with Professor Gates at Harvard, and we're developing a genetics and genealogy curriculum for middle school students across the United States. So I'm not at all opposed to using DNA testing to learn something about ancestry.
Yeah.
What I'm opposed to is people making grandiose claims about what the science can and cannot do. That's what I'm opposed to. I have no problem with people learning about or attempting to learn about ancestry using these methods, but it has to be done correctly.
Okay, so then help us do that. Help us break this down. This is a question we got from Jenny. She says, what criteria do these companies employ when selecting their participants to ensure that various groups are adequately represented across race, ethnicity, gender, class, and so on? Julie, I know that you've been on some of the trips, fact-finding trips, basically. How does that work? How do you collect samples that then people can test to see if they are then related to people in those samples?
Yeah, so a large part of the benefit of at Ancestry DNA, we have the world's largest family history resource. Over 2 million people have taken a test. So a large number of individuals that we could use to sort of use to then develop, okay, what individuals of the world might represent, can represent these regions of the world. And in addition to that, we have their family trees. So we can see, okay, these individuals have said, like in my mom's case, her family tree might say my mom's mom, all my grandparents, all my grandparents are from Italy. And so, we can use that to represent, okay, this individual might represent Italy. And the same goes for other regions of the world. And I think, as our database continues to grow, we can only get more and more individuals of diverse backgrounds. And we've seen that all throughout time as we've continued to develop our test.
So just so that I'm clear, I'm pulling up Kevin's again, just because it's what I have here on my screen. So you had researchers go to Cameroon and Congo and have people spit in test tubes?
Yeah, so as part of that, we actually acquired a public resource called the Sorensen Molecular Genealogy Foundation, that they were focused on the Y chromosome. It's one of our parts of our DNA, but they were focused on that for research. And once we acquired them, we could use that huge body of samples. And that's what's actually enabled us. That collection had a lot of individuals in Western Africa. And so actually our first version of Ancestry DNA several years ago only had one region in Western Africa. So someone might just get that they were, 84% West African. And now what we're actually able to do is break West Africa down into 6 regions for more specificity in that area, powered again by bringing in those additional samples from those regions.
I'm wondering. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, but again, the problem with that is when you have the data, all you can really say is that you share ancestry with those individuals in that region. You can't say that those people are your ancestors.
Why is that not enough? If you're just curious and you have nothing, you have a blank slate, Joe, why is that not enough?
Okay, you already knew that if you spent any time reading American history. So, and as people have alluded to early in the show, we actually have a great deal of information about the transatlantic slave trade, about where slaves came from, where they went in the Americas and in the Caribbean and Latin and in Brazil and places like that. So if you've spent any time reading the history of the slave trade, and if you have any family narrative at all, you already have a really good idea that, yes, probably your ancestors came from Central or Western Africa. You already know that. Mm-hmm. So the question is, why would you spend money, and in particular, you're talking about, in many cases, vulnerable populations that don't have a lot of money to be spending on fluff that isn't really giving them a scientific answer. Why would you encourage people to spend money on this?
Kevin?
Well, I really respect Joe's research mind, but I don't think he is arguing that DNA is not science. DNA is science, and it does give you a great start to get started. For example, Joseph said himself, it's a great start, but back it up with other research. And that's exactly what many people are doing. The DNA test gave me a wonderful start. Without that DNA test, I wouldn't have known where to start, but at least gave me a start. And then I looked up public records and I validated the DNA test. So I think I'm hearing Joseph saying he's not shutting down the DNA test. I hope Joe's not saying that, because DNA has been proven to be science. I hope Joe is not saying that. So the DNA is science, and all I think he's saying is back it up with additional research.
Let me show some pictures.
Let me be clear about what I am saying. Again, when we say DNA is science, DNA is a thing. It has information in it. But how scientists read that information is crucial. And when we look at scientists, and particularly the history of genetics in the United States and in the UK, the way people have read the history of that information has been quite flawed, and is and quite frankly is a strong association with all sorts of racist notions. And so this generation, by the way, is actually the first generation in which there have been reasonably significant numbers of African descended people in genetics. For example, my good colleague Rick Kittles, who founded African DNA, African Ancestry. Sorry. So we're looking at this in a somewhat different way from the way the traditional research genetics community has looked at this technology. And so it is very important.
Joseph, can I send you a kit for Christmas and you try it out? Have you ever tried it? Have you tried it?
No, and I wouldn't.
It's pretty interesting that you wouldn't do it, but
Professor Joe, we have a kit right here. We will send it. We will send it to you. We'll see what percentage of African you might be. I think bearing in mind your debating skills, I think you're 95% Nigerian. Malika, where do you want to take us next?
So you brought up a point actually that's resonating with a few people, Professor, racist notions that are being perpetrated. We got a video comment from someone named Dorothy Roberts. Have a listen to what she said.
One type of genetic ancestry testing company claims to be able to trace customers' racial roots to these large population groups that map onto our everyday concepts of race: Africans, Europeans, East Asians, and Native Americans. But this way of splitting customers' ancestral origins into racial percentages reinforces the myth that human beings evolved into separate, genetically distinct groups that qualify as races. What we call race is actually a social grouping that was invented for political reasons.
So race is an invented concept. It's something that me and you and the whole stream team talk about pretty often. Yeah. I know it's something we can also talk about in part 2 of our discussion.
Yeah, we do have a part 2. So if you imagine, if your breakdown is in percentages of where you are in the world, what does that mean when you find that out? Are you a specific race? Can you fit yourself into a category? That's what we will be talking about in the next part of our show. Have a look here at this picture here. We started with Kevin, we're going to end with Kevin. This is Kevin's family. Kevin, was this the family that you found after doing your research?
No, that's the family that I begat. That's the family that I brought to the world.
Beautiful. And this is your mum that you did find.
Yes.
Yes.
That's my mom that I did find.
All right, beautiful.
Yes.
There is so much more to talk about DNA ancestry testing kit. Kevin, we have a part 2. We will see you in part 2, the next edition of The Stream. Take care, everybody.